Warning, this podcast may contain bad language and content that some listeners may find offensive.
That's one. Nailed it.
Straight away this time. Definitely no cuts there.
Yep. And we are going to jump straight into the intro because this is a really bumper episode.
No jokes.
Welcome to Seesaw Podcast.
With your hosts, T, Cleves and Selena.
Every week bringing some much needed balance and humour to brighten up what can sometimes be a dark, disabled world.
Okay, I'm quite excited because this is the first time I've got a guest on the show. I say excited, I was really nervous at the time, but it's fine. I'm excited now because I know what it comes out like. So we've got Naqi coming up. And I recently met Naqi at a look weekend. If anyone is looking for a mentor, then if you're aged between 11 and 29, get on the look website.
What is it?
You can be mentored by an older visually impaired person, such as myself or Naqi, or over 100 other visually impaired people.
Are you old?
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh.
But anyway, I met Naqi on this weekend. I didn't really speak to him much then, but then afterwards he shared this TED talk with me and I thought, got to get him on the show.
You were very jumping the gun there, Selena, because we specifically said before recording, let T introduce the show. T, introduce the show.
Hello everyone and welcome to Seesaw Podcast.
And here's Naqi.
Naqi, welcome.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Nice to be here. And I'm not sure why Selena is that nervous because I'm not that shit. You'll soon find out.
I'm just feeling the pressure a little bit because it's well known on this podcast that I like to give feedback about everything and everyone else.
Oh, God.
I'm putting myself at risk here.
My internet connection might cut just as soon as you're doing that. So,
yeah.
We'll be fine.
So, where do we even start with you? World ranked tennis player?
Hang on. We haven't done the disclaimer bit. That's what I was waiting for before we even started.
That happens in post.
Yeah.
Just a disclaimer if you're a shitty guest.
New for this podcast, Selena. God.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. You see, like, I really know what I'm doing here.
Okay. So, yeah, like, where to start with it? I think we'll start at the beginning because, like, so many accolades and successes and, of course, I'm going to link your TED talk in the show notes so people can see firstly, your fashion sense. But of course, like starting off, if you'd like to introduce yourself and like your visual impairment, if you're happy to cover that.
So basically my name is spelled Naqi, which I know sounds a bit weird, but basically it comes from an Arabic word, which means pure. So my parents clearly had very high aspirations. And I was born to a Pakistani father and an Indian mother. So conflict started even before I was born. And growing up kind of mainly in Pakistan and spent a fair amount of time in India as well. And I was actually the first one in the family who had any eye condition. So it was completely unexpected. But I guess because my parents are cousins, it was to an extent likely because as we know, consanguineous relationships can lead to genetic conditions. And then a few years after that, my sister was born as well, and she has the eye condition as well. So, in our maternal and paternal side, the two of us are the only ones, interestingly. 1 out of 16 probability, but hey, it's still plausible. My eye condition is congenital glaucoma, which, for those people who don't know, is around the optic nerve being damaged. So, I used to get asked a lot, can you get an eye replacement? And I was like, well, firstly, you can't, but even if you could, it's a bit like if the wire is damaged, even if you change the front end, it's not really going to do much. So I was born with very, very limited sight and I couldn't really do much in terms of my useful vision. And my parents obviously didn't know much. When I was born, the doctor did notice that my eyes were really protruding and they were kind of like, this looks a bit concerning. But obviously my parents had no idea the extent of all of this because as a kid, unless you're Jesus, you can't really speak. So as I kind of started to get older, they started to realize when I was scrolling and if a toy felt kind of far from me, I really found it hard to find it. On my first birthday, which would normally be an occasion of joy, turned out to be one where I pretty much cried the whole time because obviously they didn't know at the time, but I was enormously photophobic. So I couldn't face light. And obviously with the lights and the cameras and all the stuff, I just wasn't coping well with that. So my eyesight, because of the intraocular pressure being really high, kept getting worse. And by the age of 7, I was completely blind. So I did have a fair amount of light perception till I was probably in my teens. But then that kind of went away as well. And then 9 years ago, now I had a surgery called enucleation, where essentially my eyes were removed and I now have prosthetic eyes. So I've lost that light perception or any kind of sensation. And that was largely to do with the fact that I used to have pain pretty much 24/7. My eyes used to water a lot and all of that stuff. I used to have enormous photophobia, and the doctor was kind of like, why are you living through this pain 24/7 when there will very, very unlikely be any cure for glaucoma in your lifetime? You're not really going to benefit from it. Might as well get it removed, because obviously in enucleation, they kind of remove the eyes, but they also cut the optic nerve, which is the connection to the brain, but that's what often causes the pain. So when that got cut, I kind of have no sensation. When you have prosthetic eyes, what you don't realize is because you have no light perception, it really messes up your sleep, because what regulates sleep oftentimes to a large extent is melatonin in your brain, and melatonin gets regulated based on the amount of light, which is why they talk about, don't look at blue light a few hours before sleeping. When it's nighttime, kind of the melatonin kicks in and goes like, yo, it's time to go to bed. So I've had really bad kind of insomnia for many, many years now. So I have to manage it very methodically with kind of not pulling all-nighters and stuff, because that really messes up my sleep, because my brain doesn't always know what's day and what's night. And that's not something my doctor told me at all at the time. And I wish I'd known that, because I don't think that would have changed the decision, but it might have made me ponder over it a little bit longer. The other obviously thing is that I have to clean my eyes every single day. Whenever I'm in the shower, I normally take my eyes out and clean them and then put them back. So I've gotten pretty used to it now, but at the start it used to be really, really tricky. I guess the only advantage of being able to take your eyes out is probably just one day in the year, which is Halloween, where you can probably do some fun stuff with it. But other than that, not really much to it. And the other thing I was really scared about with my enucleation was, I don't know if you guys, I don't really know the extent of your vision impairment, but I have something called phantom vision, which I think a lot of blind people do, which is like you can kind of imagine what's around you, like once you felt it. Like if I close my eyes, it's pretty dark. If I open my eyes, if I know where I am, it's as if like I can see it. And if someone told me that particular thing is green, my mind's eye will look at it as green. And I was really scared that if I have the surgery, but I'll lose my phantom vision. And I guess the answer was probably no, because that's something in the mind rather than the eye. So I luckily haven't lost it, but that was a huge concern of mine when I was kind of going for the surgery. So it kind of took about 6 weeks to recover from it. So yeah, I guess the cool thing is I can now choose the color of my eyes, because I can get them made in more fields, which I just did a couple of years ago. I did ask them if I could have green eyes, because apparently green eyes are pretty beautiful, but Mum said no.
I was actually going to ask, do you have like how some people have watches in like a wooden case that slides out like concertinas out? Like, do you have some of that with various eyes?
Wouldn't that be cool though? I mean, the problem, because it's on the NHS, and each, I think, pair costs about £1,500, plus the work that goes into designing it and making it and stuff. I'm not sure if they'd be happy to give me more than a pair, but it would be cool, wouldn't it, to have a different pair of eyes for different occasions? How much fun would passport control be then? With different eyes each time. Just the brown ones for now.
So, of course, sort of growing up in Pakistan, you said you moved around India as well. Of course, like you visited India for like family. Like, how was that? Of course, I can get the perspective of like growing up in the UK, being visually impaired. But of course, I assume you had your education in Pakistan as well.
Yeah.
And how did you find that experience?
Yeah, so India was mainly something I used to do every single summer. So I used to spend time, and both of those countries have charities. They're probably not as big or as well funded or as famous as the RNIB. I mean, the thing you do find, like, before coming to England, I'd never really been to the West before. And one of the things you can definitely notice it, because a lot of countries in Asia, Africa, for example, are not very well resourced. When they tend to be a lot more resourceful, right? Whereas when the things are given to you a bit more easily, I feel you end up having a sense of complacency to an extent. And I don't mean to generalize it, but that's what I found in a lot of instances, not just around disability. Like the RNIB, bloody hell, their balance sheet is huge, but I'm not sure if they really have as much of an impact as they could. The one in India is definitely a lot better and a lot more advanced. So the one I used to mainly go to is called National Association for the Blind. And mainly my mum would utilize our summers to, do stuff around, like when I was 5, I think she learned Braille. I was very hesitant to learn Braille, so I didn't really, but she learned Braille so that she could teach me kind of all year round. And one of the other things which we actually did there was to do an IQ test, because many people just think, oh, if you're blind, you're not very smart, are you? And because I was having lots of challenges at school, my school wasn't very sure if I was smart enough. So we did an IQ test, which was cool, but that came out pretty well. But school was a really interesting experience because my mum, and, again, she never really come across any visually impaired person. So I'm not sure how she had the foresight to kind of, but like, I am definitely going to send this kid to a mainstream school. He's not going to a blind school. And I think her main philosophy was, ultimately, you'll have to live in a sighted world. When you got to go to uni or work, you'll have to be in a sighted world. Why not get that encouragement from the start? And she really went around lots of different schools, just trying to convince them, can you take him? And every school pretty much said no. And there was this one school that said, yes, we'll take him on the condition that you become a teacher there. And that was interesting for my mum. It was probably a very difficult decision because my mum did her MBA. And I think back in India, to do your MBA as a woman in the 80s was a really big thing. And she was really accomplished. Like, she did really well. And then to have to give all of that up was just a really big decision. So hugely grateful to her for that sacrifice. But growing up, I was the only blind student in my school. So that was very tough. I think when you're young, kids can be so nonchalant and so playful. It used to be quite annoying for me having, these kids just like tapping me and then running away and just having fun because they knew I couldn't identify who they were or where they were going. So I couldn't really chase after them. So I used to find that really hard. And then I used to oftentimes come home and ask my mom, why am I so different? Why does this kind of happen to me? Why can't I see the ball like other people can? And oftentimes my mom wouldn't really have all the answers. She would, always do her best. But it's a really tough one when a small kid who feels really different comes and asks you those sorts of questions. And growing, like, for the first few years, I think a lot of my learning was just trying to read very, very large print in broad daylight and writing with a marker instead of a pen. And then gradually, as my eyesight kept getting worse, it became harder. And then when I lost my sight, when I was 7 years old, that's when it became really tricky because my school, which was actually brilliant, but again, they didn't know how to cope with someone who'd lost their sight. So they kind of said, I think we can't continue with him anymore. And then my mom was like, oh my God, what the hell do I do? And that's when she contacted a blind scientist in the US. I was like, this is my situation. Can you help? And he was like, no, I think he can definitely do it. You just have to find ways of doing it. And again, I think she took the help of the National Association for the Blind in India and kind of learned more teaching techniques, etc. Went back and then told the teachers. And I think while they were receptive, I think it's really hard when you have to change your method of teaching to accommodate someone else. And I don't think I fared really well because I just felt so excluded. I just felt like couldn't learn. And it was in sixth grade when one of my maths teachers was like, come, when the students are doing the classwork, I'm going to teach you some maths and stuff. And I think that was really the beginning of my love for maths. And, just really made me feel great about the fact that I could do what everyone else could as well. It was just a different way of doing it. So it was mainly based on oral stuff and them kind of reading out stuff to me. And that's how I did my exams as well. And then in 8th grade, my mum sort of taught me typing and we got introduced to JAWS. And then my school gave me the permission to have a computer in the classroom, which everyone else was really jealous of. So for the first time, I had the upper hand there. And I used to have a computer there for all of my assignments and stuff, which were mainly kind of English-based. Obviously, when it came to other subjects like physics, chemistry, and maths, it was a lot harder. And we got these German plastic sheets. They were like embossing paper, so anything that you draw on them gets embossed, so I could feel it. And that's what I used to use for a lot of those diagrams and stuff. And, as I got older as well, like our friendships grew at school and the guys were like absolutely brilliant. They didn't really treat me any different in that negative sense of the word. But
at this point, I would just like to say, I think this is going really well and I should get guests on all the time.
Well, so you don't have to talk.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
I'll do my best to drag it out for you, Selena. I'll do my best. I should mention, I used to, in 7th and 8th grade or something, use a brailler as well. One of those Perkin ones. So I ended up being at a stage where I could type really fast, but couldn't
really
read.
Loudly.
Couldn't read to save my life.
But that's when all the other kids start to hate you again. Because everyone's getting their head down. There's
Exactly. But that wasn't it. The worst thing was I had to come back home, and because my teachers couldn't read Braille, my mum and I would sit, and every single letter she'd write on top with a pen. I was like, oh, this is so painful. And we were like, this needs to change. I need to do something monotone that my teachers can actually understand. I started recording lectures in classes and stuff as well. And then kind of after 8th grade is when you have to... So I did the British curriculum in Pakistan as well. So it was kind of similar to here, but here you have GCSEs, we still had O-levels and then A-levels. So O-levels were sort of 10th and 11th. And I don't know if the system's harder or if it's just different, but like when I came here and I told people that I had to do minimum of 9 O-levels and 5 A-levels, they're like, that's a lot. They did expect
a lot for A-levels.
From you. I know. But they expected a lot from you. So what was really interesting at the end of 8th grade actually was because that's when you have to choose between science and comps, like business studies and that kind of stuff. And, you know, a lot of people are like, I think you should go for the latter. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And I was like, no, I love science. I love biology and maths. I really want to do science. And it was like, it's going to be really hard. How are you going to do your O-levels and then your A-levels with laboratory experiments and all of that stuff? But luckily my parents have always been super supportive, even though they've not always had the answer or not really known where to go, etc. And I'm really, really grateful for that because I think if you don't have that parental support, and I can understand how nerve-wracking it can be for parents because, as I said, there was no one else in the family before me who had this eye condition, so they would have been bloody paranoid. But they were just always there to support, and they were just always there to say, we're behind you. And they were like, no, if you want to go for science, mate, go for it. But then the really tricky thing that happened then was, because it was a British curriculum, our exams still used to come from I think it was called the Cambridge International Examination Centre, the CIE. So they still come from the UK, and they were like, we've never had anyone in Pakistan who's visually impaired do science, so we have no idea how to make it accessible. And luckily, my mum started that conversation quite early on, so I think it took us over a year to show them how it can be done using a combination of a computer for just written stuff, having a reader and a writer, and the embossing sheets that I talked about earlier, mainly for science subjects. And luckily, after a year or so, they were like, fine, we can give this a try. And the British Council, you know, gave me like a scribe and a reader, etc., and kind of worked out fine. I did really well in my O-levels and then went on to a different school for A-levels because my school was just till O-levels. And, you know, I again went on to do science, which was harder in some ways because as part of your assessments, you'd have to do laboratory experiments. So we were like, well, we've started the conversation with you guys already. Let's see how we can take it a step further. So that was a bit easier. And we found ways of, you know, having an assistant for those laboratory experiments who would kind of do as I told him or her to do, and then kind of read out the results, and then I could help interpret them, etc. So it was an interesting experience. I think what I would say is that being in a mainstream school was amazing in many ways. It made me very resilient. It made me have the most incredible friends. Not that you can't have incredible friends in a specialist school, of course you can. I think it just gave a certain confidence, which I felt sometimes people at specialist school might not have. However, there are obviously some disadvantages, and I would say the two big ones that I kind of felt was, number one, because I don't want to be massively different. I never used a cane, even though I bloody couldn't see a thing. I just knew where everything was. And like, you know, I'd often be with friends that kind of made that a bit easier. And the other thing was just from a reading perspective, I never really learned how to read Braille properly because I never really needed it. And I kind of sometimes wish I knew Braille because my spellings were atrocious. They still are to an extent, but at the time, my goodness, I'm sure my teachers still probably smiled at the odd word that I couldn't spell.
No, I think it's really interesting what you said about the spelling thing, actually. I remember when I was at school, like, I was told that 80% of learning is visual and like 20% is listening. And that's where a lot of visually impaired people are not very good spellers. And actually, as my vision got worse, my spellings got worse because you're not seeing the words on the page. So I totally get that.
Exactly.
And I'm sure
So you had your success with your 10,000 O levels, A levels, putting me to shame. But of course, then the next step, higher education. You went to UCL, didn't you?
So I went to UCL for my master's. I went to another uni for my undergrad. So I knew kind of maybe when I was 14, 15 that engineering was something I wanted to do. So I at least had that vision, which probably helped. But I think if I'd been confused and with all the opposition that I had in terms of, don't go for science, it's too tough, I probably would have given up on it. But I was really, really keen to do something in science, mainly engineering. I loved chemistry, so I thought of chemical engineering. And then in my first year of A levels, my dad got a job in Saudi. So he moved to Saudi. We obviously stayed back because I needed to finish my education. And my sister was doing her second year of O levels. So it would have been a lot of disruption for both of us. And then I obviously, just like every hopefully competent kid, applied to lots of unis in the UK and the US because that's what I wanted to do. I'd never really been outside of Asia at that point. And everyone said, the West is great for accessibility and stuff. You should really apply. And, you've got the grades. And I'm like, fine, I'll do it. And I applied to 10 unis in the US and not one of them accepted me. And it's really hard to say because they're never going to say, because you're blind, we didn't accept you, etc. But who knows if that was. But a lot of my friends who were probably equally as good as me got into some of the really good unis. And because I was applying for engineering and natural sciences, etc., I don't know if they had a part to play, but literally none of them accepted me. And that day I literally wept in front of my mum for that. I just never expected that. I'm like, I'm not a bad student. I've done so well. I've gotten like my A's in chemistry and maths, etc. Why are they not accepting me? But in the UK as well, I got accepted by 2 unis here, and both of them, I have no idea why, just said, fine, we'll offer you an admission, but even for your disability services, you have to pay about £35 an hour. I'm like, this is unacceptable. I cannot afford all of this. So I had to unfortunately say no to these unis, and then I was left without a uni. And then the option was go for a gap year or do something else. And then my family moved to Saudi. And then someone said, there's a new university in Riyadh you might want to check out. And it was very new. We're like, what have we got to lose? We went there and tried, and they were kind of like, nah, I think it's going to be a bit difficult because you can't see with engineering and stuff. But the really interesting and serendipitous thing was, a week before the orientation, I got a text and it was like, we invite all our students joining us this year to come to Riyadh for the orientation. So my family used to live in the Eastern Province, and the Dammam, it's about 400 kilometers, so it wasn't close. And when I got the text, I didn't bother to verify it. I'm like, let's just go. And we all went. Yeah. And I called them when I was getting on the train, and they were like, no, man, we sent you that text by mistake. Like, you don't have admission. I'm like, shit, I bought the ticket, mate. I'm coming. We're going to make a day trip out of this. And then we went, and then we just waited to hopefully speak to someone. Couldn't get anyone. And then in the afternoon, we were like, we're not going home. We need to speak to the dean. Then I find he's going to come in the evening, go for it. And then I sat with him. He kind of spoke to me about why I wanted to do it and asked me a few questions about how I study, etc., etc. And then he was like, maybe I need to check with the board. You need to give me a week. And then luckily, after a week or so, he was like, fine, we're willing to admit you on a trial basis. And I was just obviously on cloud 9. I was like, this is fantastic. Yeah. But it was like, we'll try you for 6 months. If you do well, number one, you can continue your degree, and number two, you can get a scholarship, because again, it was really expensive. My parents have, I would never want to burden them with tuition fees because it is horrendously expensive everywhere. And I was like, I need a scholarship. I can't function. Like, even in that uni, the fees was about 19,000 pounds a year. Like, my parents can never afford it. So yeah, I did, as you can imagine, did really well. After my first semester, which was a 6 month, I actually got pretty much all A grades. So I'm like, fine, I think we can continue. And that's how kind of the 4 years went. I absolutely loved every single year of it. What I found amazing was that the professors could see how keen I was to learn. They really went out of their way to help me learn and find ways in which we could cope. So for one of the courses in computer aided design, my professor was like, I'll be your screen reader because no screen readers can cope with that. I'll essentially tell you what's on the screen. I'll help you understand how you work the system. And then he 3D printed one of my things that kind of made me feel what the end output was like. And it was just those things that just made you feel so much more value, right? And it's like, if you can make the adjustments for someone, they can do it. And again, my friends were kind of really keen to help. And there was a friend of mine who struggled with a lot of different concepts, whereas I got the concept really well, but obviously I couldn't read the book. So we kind of struck this deal where he'd read out to me and I'd explain the concepts to him. And it worked as a really good partnership. We were really good friends and kind of studied together pretty much every single weekend, etc. And the thing that really sticks out to me was, 4 years after that, because again, this was an American university, so it's 4 years rather than 3. So my mom had kind of told me when I was going for science, it is my dream to see you graduate as an engineer and to become one, because she knew how hard it would be. And I just didn't know if I could ever fulfill that dream. And then 4 years, which was kind of near my graduation time, I told my parents, you've got to come to my graduation. And my parents and sister came. And what I didn't tell them at the time was that I was going to give the student speech, because despite being the only kind of person in my cohort with a visual impairment, I actually had the highest grade among everyone else. So they chose me as a student speaker. And that for me was honestly one of the proudest things, to kind of think about the dream my mom had all those years ago, kind of see me graduate as an engineer. And then here I was with that certificate in hand as an industrial engineer. And the really cool thing out the back of that was, when I got out of the hall, one of the CEOs approached me and was like, I'd love to have you in my company. And I just never thought that could be possible. I'm like, why would you have a blind guy come and work for you? But just to kind of see that openness and him kind of willing to explore and stuff was just amazing. And that's the company I ended up working with kind of a few months after, and then did that for two years, and then came to UCL to do my master's in systems engineering, which again was an amazing experience.
I work within higher education, and like, from what I see from engineering, like, they're always about how, like, being creative in solving issues.
Yes.
I'm just surprised hearing like how much pushback you got from so many places, even doing the trial at the place, like the university you ended up going to. Like, I'm just thinking, well, that's engineering. It's creative solutions using methods that no one would ever think of for a problem. And I'm surprised that there was so much pushback, because you would think they'd relish the challenge of, right, let's make the entire curriculum accessible to everyone in the most creative ways we possibly can.
Part of it is to do with the creativity probably reaches a limit when they see a blind person that, oh my God, this person. But also a lot of the time when you're actually working with universities and stuff, or with institutions, the people who accept you, hire you, are not those guys, right? They're often people in HR or in certain departments who probably don't have those skills. And they're like, I'm not sure. Will it be good for our bottom line? Will it be good for our reputation, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. And then obviously that kind of then makes it a little bit harder as well. So it's not as straightforward. But I think with all of those experiences, I've found, like, once you speak to them, once they understand how you work, and that it's a question of making adjustments rather than your mind not being good enough, they really go out of their way to help you out. And that's what I found. Like, I had an amazing time in both of my unions, with just my professors being so willing to help, and kind of students, seeing whatever they could do to help out as well.
Absolutely. And you made a great success of it as well. So yeah, props to you to putting in all the effort and proving everyone wrong. Welcome back to the wraparound sensation that is Seesaw. We hope you enjoyed the first part of this episode, which is going to be multiple parts, of course, implied by what I just said. Look forward to the second part next week, and there is a third part which we will release in the future. So
at some point, who knows?
At some point. So hit us up on the following links, and we will see you next week. Say goodbye, everyone, to prove I'm not on my own.
Thank you for listening to Seesaw Podcast. Your feedback and comments mean a lot to us, so if you'd like to get in touch, you can do so in the following ways.
You can find us on Twitter at Seesaw Pod, Facebook, Instagram and YouTube at Seesaw Podcast. And you can also join us at seesawpodcast.com. Remember to like, rate, review us and share us with a friend. This podcast was recorded in front of a blind audience.
I'm going for a quick toilet break. We can continue.
Please put yourself on mute. And camera turned off.